Deion Sanders is battling on two fronts: his own health at Colorado and his son's uncertain future in Cleveland. While recovering from a serious medical scare, Sanders continues to lead his college program with unshaken resolve. But behind the scenes, his energy is increasingly focused on Shedeur, on why the Browns are holding him back, on the disrespect swirling in the media, and on the legal moves his family is now making.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Deion's presence looms large in this storyline, not just as a father, but as a cultural force, one unwilling to let his son be sidelined by poor leadership or politics. The deeper this situation goes, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just about football. It's about who gets to lead, whose narratives are protected, and how far a franchise will go to avoid disruption, even at the cost of its future. As Deion's voice grows louder and Shedeur's absence becomes impossible to justify, the Browns find themselves trapped between tradition and transformation. And every day they hesitate, the weight of that choice only grows heavier. It started with a twinge. Something subtle in the ribs, easy to ignore, until it wasn't. Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback the Browns never deserved, sustained an oblique injury during practice. At first, the team called it precautionary. Then day-to-day. Weeks later, he's still sidelined while the offense crumbles without him. His rhythm? Gone. His timing? Shot. The only thing left was doubt. Doubt in the training staff, the coaching staff, and the organization's entire plan for their most promising asset. Keeping Shedeur out might have made sense for recovery. But they didn't just sideline him, they erased him. No first-team reps, no game day dress-outs, no confidence that he'd be back in rotation. And for what? A slow, lumbering offense built around conservative play calls and safer choices. The kind of offense that says don't lose instead of go. Enter Dillon Gabriel. With a 32% completion rate, Gabriel's numbers weren't just bad, they were historically awful. The passes were late, the reads were off, and the ball placement made defenders look like receivers. But instead of making a change, the Browns doubled down. Gabriel stayed under center, even as the locker room and fanbase watched the offense fall apart in real time. What started as a short-term fill-in quickly became a baffling long-term decision. Gabriel's inability to move the chains turned every Browns possession into a test of patience. Missed third-down conversions, stalled drives, and wasted red zone trips became routine. And yet, the narrative stayed fixed. Shedeur isn't ready. Except everyone watching knew that wasn't true. This wasn't about readiness, it was about... When Gabriel made dismissive comments about Shedeur in a post-game presser, the fuse was lit. Enter Stephen A. Smith. In a fiery on-air, Smith torched Gabriel for the disrespect, calling out not just the player but the culture around him. He wasn't subtle. This was about more than football, it was about professionalism, race, and the way black quarterbacks are often held to different standards, especially when their last name is Sanders. Smith pointed out how quickly the media flipped on Shedeur, a player with proven talent, while propping up Gabriel despite no real results. The contrast was glaring. The underlying tone? That Shedeur, as a high-profile black athlete with a famous father, was being set up to fail. And whether intentional or not, it was working. Loss after loss piled up, each one more frustrating than the last. The Browns couldn't score, couldn't convert, and couldn't commit to a quarterback with upside. Shedeur watched from the sidelines as the Browns fell to the Lions, the Dolphins, the Rams. Games that could have been opportunities for growth became proof of dysfunction. Fans began asking obvious questions. Why was the best quarterback on the roster not playing? Why were the Browns sticking with a guy completing less than a third of his passes? Why was Shedeur only seen tossing warm-ups while the team collapsed on national TV? The coaching staff had no answers, at least none they were willing to say out loud. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Deion Sanders was still coaching through his own storm. Blood clots, surgeries, and recovery videos. Coach Prime didn't miss a beat. Even with his leg health in jeopardy, Deion stayed in front of cameras and players, still guiding Colorado with a calm fury. He wasn't just coaching football, he was building something bigger. A program, a culture, a movement. And yet, while Deion stayed the face of leadership and perseverance, his son was being buried on the Browns' depth chart. Behind the scenes, the elder Sanders started getting vocal. Not in front of reporters, but in calls, in meetings, in private. Sources say the tone changed. The patience was gone. When Shedeur finally spoke, it was cautious but clear. He talked about letting the process play out, but his face told a different story. The frustration was boiling just under the surface. You could see it in how he dodged questions about playing time. You could hear it in how carefully he talked about his injury. There was no trust left, not in the rotation, not in the leadership, and definitely not in the narrative being spun around him. Rumors swirled. The Sanders family had retained legal counsel. Allegations emerged that Shedeur's draft value had been artificially lowered. Intercepted communications allegedly revealed a coordinated effort among league insiders to suppress his stock. The reason? Branding politics, economics, fear of the Sanders name disrupting their well-oiled machine. And now we get to Jimmy Haslam, the man at the top. Reports surfaced that Haslam personally reached out to Deion Sanders, begging, not just asking, that Shedeur not leave. According to insiders, Haslam made a direct plea for Deion to use his influence to keep Shedeur on the Browns roster, no matter what was happening behind the scenes. That moment, an NFL owner pleading with a college coach to manage a pro quarterback, said everything. Haslam wasn't worried about development. He was worried about headlines. About losing the one bright spot that still had fans watching. If Shedeur left, the PR disaster would be immediate. And he knew it. Kevin Stefanski tried to hold the line. In his post-game comments, he deflected. Talked about week-to-week evaluations, trust in the process, and team-first mentalities. But the facade was cracking. Analysts noticed how his language shifted from confidence to caution. The locker room chatter was leaking. Players weren't buying the party line anymore. Insiders whispered about fractures in leadership. Some coaches backed Shedeur, others wanted to keep playing it safe. No one wanted to own the decision, which meant no one made a move. And while the power vacuum widened, Gabriel stayed QB1, Shedeur stayed sidelined, and the Browns stayed. Every now and then a clip of Shedeur would surface. Perfect spiral in warm-ups. Bullet pass in practice. Silent leadership from the sidelines. Fans started compiling them like receipts, proof that the talent was still there, even if the opportunity wasn't. His NFL moments became breadcrumbs of what could have been, and what still might be if he ever got the chance. The more fans saw those flashes, the more the narrative turned. It wasn't just the media now. It was everyone. Social media, analysts, even former players. The pressure on the Browns to make a move grew louder by the week. And so far, all they'd done was ignore it. Through it all, Deion remained the steady flame. Health battles aside, he showed up, at practices, on campus, in interviews. He filmed promo videos with his sons. He posted cryptic messages on Instagram. He preached patience while living urgency. And behind the camera, he worked the phones, building a case that went far beyond one quarterback on one team. This was about control. About how black athletes are evaluated, handled, and marketed. About how certain names disrupt certain systems. And about how legacy, faith, and cultural power don't always fit into neatly controlled NFL narratives. If Shedeur leaves, it won't be because he gave up, it'll be because the system did. And if Deion Sanders has anything to say about it, the system's about to get a wake-up call. So what do you think? Is the Browns' dysfunction incompetence or something deeper? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the chaos behind the scenes, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. The last time Shedeur touched the field in a Browns uniform, it was brief. A few snaps during a blowout loss to the Vikings. Nothing flashy, just controlled movement, clean mechanics, and a poise that made even the commentators pause. You could see the difference, the timing, the vision, the calm under pressure. And then, pulled again. Back to the bench. Back to the shadows. It wasn't about wins or losses anymore, it was about message control. The Browns had invested too much in the Gabriel is our guy story to pivot now. Giving Shedeur real minutes would have been an admission of failure. So they kept him hidden in plain sight, knowing full well the entire league was watching. The Dolphins' game broke whatever illusion was left. Gabriel couldn't make it through the second quarter without throwing 2 picks. The defense was on the field for what felt like eternity. Fans started booing. On the sidelines, Shedeur warmed up. Cameras caught it. The crowd roared. Stefanski looked the other way. Instead of putting him in, they handed the ball off 12 straight times to drain the clock. The message was loud and clear. They'd rather lose quietly than win with Sanders. The boos got louder. Social media lit up. Every analyst asked the same thing: what are they protecting? And more importantly, from it didn't help that Gabriel's preseason tape was already suspect. Sure, he had flashes, a decent rollout, a clean throw against backups. But when it came to first-team defenses, he couldn't adjust. The timing was off. The accuracy disappeared. Yet the coaching staff clung to those isolated clips like they proved something. By comparison, Shedeur's preseason showed efficiency, calm reads and quick releases. Nothing explosive but exactly what you wanted from a developing QB. Still, the staff kept pushing the idea that Gabriel had earned it in practice. Even though the film, the stats, and the scoreboard said otherwise. Deion back at Colorado had seen enough. You could see it in his body language at interviews. He stopped using the Browns' name. Started referring to certain NFL organizations instead. He shifted into protection mode, less flashy coach prime, more strategic father. Behind the scenes he met with attorneys. The family's legal team started assembling evidence. Text messages, emails, intercepted calls. The claim? That league insiders were collaborating to suppress Shedeur's value. That he was being benched not because of skill, but because of who he was, who his father was, and what they represented. When Shedeur finally addressed the rumors, he didn't confirm anything, but he didn't deny it either. In his words, "What's meant for me can't be taken from me." But there was tension in his voice. You could hear the exhaustion of carrying the burden of being both a quarterback and a symbol. He talked about recovery, about staying ready, about staying focused. But he also pointed out that you can't develop if you don't play. That you can't grow if your reps are managed by people who see you as a threat instead of an asset. The gloves weren't off, but they weren't fully on either. The losses kept coming. Patriots, Raiders, Jets. Games that should have been winnable turned into showcases of dysfunction. Fans started turning off games by halftime. Commentators began openly speculating about locker room divides. Local reporters hinted at player frustrations. It wasn't just the quarterback room anymore, the entire team was cracking. And yet, the Browns stayed the course. Gabriel started. Shedeur stood. And every week the gap between them widened. Even in losses, Gabriel got praise for managing adversity. While Shedeur, even in silence, was questioned for his attitude. In the Patriots' post-game interview, Stefanski looked tired. Not just from losing, but from defending decisions everyone knew didn't make sense. When asked about the quarterback situation, he stuck to the same vague script. "We're evaluating all options." But at that point no one believed him. There were whispers that Stefanski wasn't even calling all the shots. That upper management had vetoed quarterback changes. That keeping Gabriel on the field had less to do with performance and more to do with optics. Optics controlled far above the locker room level. In a rare sit-down interview, Shedeur gave perhaps the clearest view of where his head was. He spoke candidly about legacy, about pressure, about having to fight narratives that followed him from high school to college to the NFL. He didn't name names, but he didn't need to. The message was clear. He felt boxed in by people more interested in shaping his story than letting him write it. He also hinted at big decisions coming soon. When asked about next season, he smiled and said, "We'll see what happens. Nothing's permanent." For a player who once said he wanted to stay in Cleveland long-term, that spoke volumes. Looking back, the clues were always there. Even in the preseason, Shedeur was rarely featured in mic ups. The camera often panned to Gabriel, not him. On the sideline, Shedeur looked engaged, locked in, but the spotlight was elsewhere. It was subtle, but now it feels calculated. Analysts began combing through old footage, comparing rotations, sideline behavior, and press availability. What they found painted a pattern. Sanders was being deliberately minimized in team narratives. A slow erasure. And once people saw it, they couldn't unsee it. And through all of this, Jimmy Haslam was playing defense behind the scenes. Multiple sources confirmed he held emergency meetings with top executives. Not to fix the offense. Not to get Shedeur more snaps. But to manage perception. To avoid leaks. To try to salvage what was left of public trust. He even reportedly floated a mid-season PR campaign. Videos, behind-the-scenes content, puff pieces. None of it materialized. Probably because everyone involved knew the truth wouldn't fit inside a documentary. It would blow the whole thing up. Now, Haslam's only option may be the one thing he didn't want to do. Give Shedeur what he's earned. Or risk losing it. Recent shots of Shedeur during warm-ups tell their own story. His helmet on, jaw tight, eyes scanning the field, not as a backup, but as someone who knows he's better than what the team is putting out there. His body language says it louder than any press conference ever could. He's ready. He's waiting. And he's being ignored. Every pass he throws in practice becomes another piece of evidence. Fans repost them clip by clip like receipts. It's not a matter of if he can play. It's a matter of why he isn't. And there's only so long the Browns can keep acting like no one notices. The Raiders game might have been the final straw. Gabriel looked overwhelmed from the start, telegraphed throws, delayed decisions, and a red zone interception that killed a 13-play drive. The Browns lost that game by a single score. And the post-game analysis wasn't kind. Every analyst asked the same thing: how do you let a defense play its heart out while your offense gives the game away, and still not try something different? Shedeur sat the whole time, once again fully suited up, once again untouched by game action. Even the opposing coach reportedly told a reporter, "We were surprised he didn't." Stefanski's press conference after that loss was tense. He stood at the podium, lips tight, hands gripped on either side. When asked directly about Shedeur, he repeated that decisions were made with the long-term health of the team in mind. But that excuse was starting to sound like a cover. Pressed again, he said, "There's a process we're committed to." But by this point, even local media weren't buying it. Process? The process had yielded 5 straight losses, a collapsing offense, and growing resentment inside the locker room. What process was this? Self-sabotage? Footage from practice that week showed Shedeur working with the second team, throwing tighter spirals and cleaner reads than the starter. No limp. No hesitation. Whatever injury concerns the team was clinging to, they weren't visible. Not even close. Players began whispering to reporters off the record. One said, "It's getting hard to watch." Another, "We all know who the best QB is." The divide was becoming public. And when that happens, it's only a matter of time before the locker room fractures completely. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Shedeur, scheduled for a team-sponsored community event, took 2 questions from reporters. One asked if he still trusted the coaching staff. He paused, looked down, and then said, "I trust God and my family. Football is business." The message was loud. Not angry. Not bitter. Just detached. He wasn't pleading for reps, he wasn't lobbying for starts. He was checking out of the illusion that meritocracy ruled the building. The Browns didn't just lose a quarterback that day, they lost control of the narrative. Deion followed up days later during a press hit in Colorado. When asked about Shedeur's role in Cleveland, he said, "He's built different. He's prepared. But he's not going to be played with." It was subtle, but the implication was massive. Deion wasn't just a coach, he was a father. And no father watches his son get mishandled on national television without acting. The tone had changed from hopeful to surgical. The legal filings, the media whispers, the leaks, they all pointed in one direction. Something bigger was coming. Meanwhile, Gabriel kept suiting up, throwing more picks than touchdowns and delivering press conferences with the same vague optimism. His photos from games started trending, but not for the right reasons. Missed reads, overthrows, confused sideline glances. It became performance art at that point. The team pretending everything was fine while the house was clearly on fire. Gabriel, to his credit, didn't throw teammates under the bus. But it didn't matter. The results were the same every week. And fans were done pretending. In the Raiders' loss, there was one moment cameras picked up. A shot of Shedeur alone on the bench, staring at the field while the clock ran out. Everyone else had moved to midfield. Coaches talking, players leaving. But he stayed silent, still, like someone recording every second. That image went viral. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. But it said everything. He wasn't sulking. He wasn't pouting. He was watching, remembering, storing up every decision that told him over and over again that he wasn't being given the shot he earned. As pressure mounted, Stefanski and GM Andrew Berry reportedly held a closed-door meeting with ownership. The leak said it all. Disagreements on direction, disagreements on optics, and a deep divide on what came next. Berry, known for being measured and strategic, had pushed for Shedeur's elevation weeks earlier. Stefanski resisted. The two, once aligned, now stood on opposite sides of the Shedeur dilemma. And as the team's losses piled up, ownership started leaning toward one of them, and it wasn't Stefanski. The icy relationship between Shedeur and Stefanski was never publicly confirmed, but people noticed. Short conversations at practice. No sideline chats. No visible mentoring. Just tension. When asked if they had a good working relationship, Shedeur answered, "We respect each other." Not, "We communicate well." Not, "He's been great." Just respect. The lowest possible bar in pro sports. And when that's all that's left between a head coach and his potential franchise quarterback, the writing is already on the wall. The Browns started the season thinking they had time. Now they're out of it. Out of explanations. Out of goodwill. And maybe, out of Shedeur Sanders. 49ers. The game against the 49ers was supposed to be a turning point. National spotlight. playoff implications, a measuring stick for any quarterback trying to prove they belong in the league. And still, Gabriel got the start. Shedeur didn't see a single snap. But what did show up? More whispers. More sideline footage. More clips of Shedeur tossing warm-ups with textbook mechanics while the starter struggled to hit screens. Was déjà vu. Another wasted opportunity to course correct. And this time the stakes were higher. San Francisco's defense wasn't just good, it was punishing. Gabriel barely made it out of the first half upright. And as the cameras panned to Shedeur one more time, sitting calmly, clipboard in hand, the entire fanbase knew this wasn't about readiness. It hadn't been for. That same weekend, Jimmy Haslam was photographed leaving the facility in the early morning hours. Alone, head down, no security. It wasn't just a rough week, it was a full-blown reckoning. Ownership meetings were reportedly tense, with Haslam stuck between cleaning up a leadership mess and clinging to a regime that was unraveling in real time. You could almost see it in his face, the realization that this wasn't just about football anymore. This was about credibility, optics, and the potential loss of the most marketable high-upside player the franchise had touched in years. He knew the stakes, and they were only getting. Then came the leaks. Medical images. Documents. Reports that Shedeur's oblique issue had been compounded by mishandled recovery protocol. That he had been cleared weeks earlier, but held back anyway. The photos of him receiving treatment told their own story. He wasn't just being protected, he was being controlled. The outcry was immediate. Fans demanded answers. Analysts started using words like malpractice and manipulation. And Shedeur? He said nothing. He didn't need to. The evidence had finally caught up to the narrative. The truth was out. That night, Deion went live on Instagram. No graphics, no filters, just Coach Prime talking to his people. We don't run from nothing, he said. We lead. We protect our own. And when the time's right, we show him who we are. It was part father, part coach, and all warning. So now it's no longer a matter of if the Browns will act. It's how long they're willing to pretend the walls aren't caving in. Because Shedeur Sanders has been ready. And the world knows it. If you're just as fed up with the spin cycle as we are, hit that like button. Share this with someone who's still buying what the Browns are selling. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're watching with you. And if you're not already subscribed, fix that now. The story? Far from over.